Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the official launch of Insurance Times' Destination Insurance campaign, and specifically the industry-wide charter we have created to support small and medium-sized UK general insurance businesses in mitigating ongoing talent challenges with a comprehensive list of organisational commitments. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Katie Scott and I'm the editor at Insurance Times. Very shortly, I'll be introducing some experienced industry thought leaders who are going to join me for a talent-centric discussion. But to kick things off today, I'd like to start by telling you a bit more about Destination Insurance. So Insurance Times created Destination Insurance to be an ongoing, editorially driven campaign which seeks to support the UK general insurance and London markets in addressing its many talent challenges and helping the industry to become a properly earmarked destination for fulfilling careers, rather than maintain the usual trope of talent falling into the sector. For us, Destination Insurance is a collaborative platform for talent-based discussions, where the silos of industry subsectors or firm type are swept away, and market participants can truly put their heads together to share best practice, learnings, challenges and ideas when it comes to future-proofing talent in our sector. This mentality is very much based on feedback and conversations we've had with you all over the last year or so, and we are dedicated to being the prime facilitator and connector for talent-focused conversations to help secure the future of UKGI as a flourishing, diverse, innovative and successful profession. Destination Insurance currently has a number of key pillars. The one we are launching today is our official Destination Insurance Charter for UKGI in the London market, tailored for small to medium-sized industry firms, suppliers and trade bodies. It features 5 commitments for signatories to adhere to, covering recruitment, diversity, young talent attraction, cross-industry collaboration and shared learning. We very much hope that this charter will become embedded in talent strategies and support market firms in making UKGI a career destination. At this point, I'd like to issue a quick thank you to the trade bodies and organisations that took the time to give me feedback on the various drafts of the charter. Your help has ensured that the charter is as relevant and impactful as possible for our market. Uniquely, the Destination Insurance Charter also has a number of commitments for us at Insurance Times. So we promise to have a clear section of our website dedicated to talent-related content, and we commit to publishing a set number of talent-focused articles each week to give you the materials and ideas you need to develop and progress talent strategies. We also promise to provide a physical event for sharing best practice and experiences. Our inaugural Destination Insurance Conference will be held in London in January, and I very much hope to see as many of you as possible in person at the event next year. For further details on the conference and to read a copy of the charter, please visit our brand shiny new website, destination.insurancetimes.co.uk. So many of you across the market are also hugely passionate about talent, and I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome 3 representatives from Destination Insurance's current sponsors to join me in a discussion about some of the ongoing talent challenges. So I'd like to introduce Adam Harper, Executive Director of Strategy, Advocacy and Professional Standards at the Chartered Insurance Institute, Steve Collinson, Chief Human Resources Officer at Zurich, and Gemma McWilliam, Chief People Officer at HDI. Thank you so much for joining me today, guys, to officially launch Destination Insurance. It's really exciting. Fab. So let's dive straight into our panel discussion. So we're going to cover some prominent talent challenges, sort of start that shared learning and best practice, really. Obviously, if you guys at home have got any questions you want to ask our panelists, do use the Q&A function as and when you see fit, and we'll either do questions at the end or throughout, depending on what crops up. So do feel free to interact. We'd love to hear from you. But first of all, I really wanted to dive in initially with one of the biggest challenges I think the market faces, which is the attraction of new younger talent into the sector, something I know a lot of firms are seeking to address. So this is a particular problem for our marketplace because of the demographic of our workforce. So statistics from IDEX Consulting, for example, detail that 25% of the insurance workforce will retire in the next 10 years, with 26% of the market's current employees aged over 50. So IDEX found that only 11% of the insurance sector's workforce is aged between 20 and 30, and only 4% of young people actively consider insurance as a career option. So they're quite frightening, I guess, in a way, when you think about future-proofing. But I just would like to ask the panel, so what do you think is the biggest roadblock in attracting entry-level school leaver talent into our industry? So I don't know who wants to kick this one off. Gemma, should we come to you first?
Sure, no problem. Good afternoon, everyone. So, Katie, you won't be surprised that my answer is a fairly simple one here, and it's that the industry is just still seen as very traditional. It's not seen from the outside in as particularly exciting or innovative. And when you think about what many young people's relationship with insurance is, it's pretty transactional and quite limited. It's often limited to car insurance or potentially sort of first purchases for homes later. We have so much more than that to offer, but actually when people look at it from the outside in, it's that quite traditional industry that they still see. And so for me, that's the biggest roadblock. It's us having an opportunity to showcase that there is so much more in the industry than perhaps they might first expect.
Gemma, I dive in. Completely agree. The sort of the challenge around what people think of when they think of insurance. Everyone thinks, don't they, of maybe customer service management and underwriting and risk assessment and claims, and we all know that careers are so much bigger. I was also going to think about the idea of connecting potential applicants with our core purpose and finding opportunities for people to really understand what customers want of an insurance organization, especially if you're in a firm that is beyond, say, the traditional personal lines. As you said, Gemma, our connection or our understanding of insurance when we're quite young is probably, a first car, maybe your student insurance, but actually, the firm, my firm and your organization are so much broader than that. And I think it's really important to help people to understand what our customers actually value from their insurance and how it enables kind of day-to-day life in society. I wouldn't cross a road or get on a plane without insurance being in place. And I think connecting potential applicants and especially younger people with what customers really value from insurance can be really powerful.
Yeah, and I'd go a step further, Steve, and say it's also the curiosity when we spark sometimes when we go and talk at particular careers fairs, and we can talk about the breadth of what we insure, particularly when you sit in the corporate or specialty line segment. And like you say, suddenly someone's association with insurance feels very different to what we're presenting to them as the opportunities. And that's just in the underwriting space. I think when you look at the range of support functions that we need to be able to operate, you then see so many different opportunities for people. But it's getting the opportunity to showcase that to people at an early enough point.
Adam, you're quite quiet there.
Okay.
Oh, that's better. Thank you.
I was just saying was that picking up on the comments that both Gemma and Steve have made already, won't come as a great surprise that everything that they've said I would completely agree with. I was taken by, in your introduction, the statistic around the fact that only 4% of young people are actively considering insurance as a career option. And I think that for me is the critical factor that needs to be something that's focused upon. Again, you talked about that sort of standard trope about people falling into the profession. I was at an event recently where a delegate was talking about what we need to do is we need to try and drive up the numbers of people that are falling into the profession. And I challenged it because what we really want to be doing is driving up the numbers of people who are actively choosing it as their career option to try and move into. And I think to some extent, we need to find a way to sort of overcome the perception of the sector, of it being seen as something that's traditional, and properly position it as a profession so that it's something people can see that they can join, as many people do, and then progress throughout their career and into a variety of different roles. So I think, definitely something there that we would need to explore. But that's not going to be something which is going to be achieved in isolation. I think that it's definitely got to be something which is driven by collective and collaborative effort across the sector if we're going to properly achieve that shift in behaviours.
Definitely, completely agree. And Gemma, you mentioned a little bit earlier there about careers fairs and talks at school. And I guess that obviously ties into the point you've all made about how do we reach out? I mean, do students still engage in things like careers fairs, particularly at perhaps university as well as maybe sort of secondary school level? Or is there a better way of reaching that audience? And like you said, of making people excited. I mean, it's interesting. I had a conversation with an underwriter fairly recently, and they said that their initial assumptions of insurance was that it was call center work. So like like you've all said, there's definitely that perception gap. But when it comes to careers fairs, are they actually a good opportunity for engagement, or are they a bit of an outdated model now?
So I guess how a careers fair looks today is probably somewhat different to the careers fair I would have attended, Katie. But we definitely see I guess a more modern version of that as an opportunity. And the London Market Association Careers Festival over the summer were an opportunity to get to know more about the industry, and that much more informal festival type environment provides an opportunity. But for me, it's less about the vehicle to get to people, but more about who's getting to those individuals. So I would say certainly one of our learnings, or one of the things that we look to do, is to bring young professionals to talk to young professionals. So it can be still a very traditional, here's what we do, and a presentation. It can be a much more interactive dialogue. It can be a more informal type setup, but it's about individuals that can resonate with one another, having the conversation, people being able to talk about the experience they've had very recently, having joined a firm, having come into the sector. I think that's what's key. So it's less about the vehicle we use. It's more about people feeling that they have some kind of connection, and it's getting young people to talk to young people about a career in the industry. For me, that's made a difference.
No, it's really interesting. Adam, Steve, do you have anything to add on that careers fair point? I mean, what for you guys is a modern careers fair, I guess?
Well, I mean, I would completely agree with what Jen was saying, is that there are a variety of different channels, and that clearly is one that still has a place as part and parcel of looking to drive up interest in the profession. I mean, what I think would be an additional consideration as part of that messaging that Jen has mentioned there is, reflecting on the fact that the way in which technology is changing the landscape of the sector, and therefore it's requiring a very different set of skills. And so if you have individuals who have embarked on careers in recent years, who can then speak from firsthand experience about the innovative dynamics of their roles, I think that would be a really powerful message that would help to encourage it. And I think whilst careers fairs and sessions at universities and at schools are a very traditional way, it doesn't mean to say that those messages wouldn't translate in that environment. But I think we would then need to ensure that that's then supplemented through careers hubs, online resources, etc., so that there's a real consistent thread to what's being said.
That makes a lot of sense. And I guess another route that I wanted to sort of talk to you guys about was around graduate schemes and apprenticeships. Obviously, that's another key way of sort of driving young talent into our marketplace. What is really the uptake of these types of schemes from what you guys have seen in your firms and across the market? Are they actually successful at attracting young talent, and are enough firms really offering these types of opportunities?
I'm happy to dive in on this one and sort of give a Zurich view. So talking from personal experience, we've had really good success in our kind of building an early careers program, from internship to apprenticeship to graduate, that kind of really brings our offering together. So for context, we hire about 30 of each of those populations a year. Some years we hire more apprentices, and actually we find once people have joined us on that kind of route, they're really sticky, to use a terrible technical HR term. Once they're through the door, we retain them really well. They progress really well in both leadership and technical roles. And for context, Katie, to give you an idea, so we are looking for 30 grads this year. We've had over 12,000 applications for those positions, largely driven by really great work by our in-house talent team, developing the offering, making the really important thing that I asked them to do a few years ago, which was to make sure that they reach a wide and diverse audience of potential applicants, and also that hiring managers, because of course this isn't an HR job, hiring into these positions isn't an HR job, it should really be business led. It's all very well for us to attract people from a diverse background, but actually our hiring managers have to be prepared to look for different skills, because looking for competence and experience when people are just coming out of university, broadly speaking, people have very similar skills. So yes, it's still a really successful route for us. I think there are challenges. The graduate market is really, really competitive. When people are on their graduate recruitment journey, you mustn't fool yourself into thinking they've only applied for you. Of course they haven't. They've applied for a number of roles. They might get offers in a number of firms. And the rise of the renege has been really interesting over the last few years. People keep their options open for as long as they possibly can. And you think you've got your cohort sorted, and then people think about an offer elsewhere. So as well as attracting people, putting them through a good experience, helping them to understand the purpose of your organization, keeping them warm or hot, preferably, through the process from the point at which you say, here's your job offer, to them walking through the door is really, really important. But I think internships, apprenticeships, and graduates have a huge part to play in our collective future.
Definitely. How on earth do you narrow it down from that huge pool? Again, like you say, there's similar experience across the board. I mean, that must be quite a challenging job.
Yeah, it is, and it's a traditional kind of funnel. You go, you look for skills, experiences, competence sometimes, but really focusing very heavily on skills. It's really hard, though. I never envy my team's job in taking such a broad portfolio and getting to the. In fact, I asked one of my talent managers yesterday, "How do you know you get the 30 best?" Their answer was long and very technical.
Can I just come back on that, Steve? I mean, it's when you look at the imbalance in that number between the demand and the availability of roles that's there, and again, notwithstanding the point that you were making about the increase in the sort of renege rate, where you've got individuals who are exploring options with a variety of different firms. What happens to those that are unsuccessful? I mean, if there was a level of sufficient interest to submit an application to take up a role with yourselves, and again, given the challenges that the sector faces in terms of attracting new talent, what proportion of that huge number that you're dealing with walk away disappointed, do you think, at the end of it, and then effectively potentially leave the sector for good at that point?
Yeah, and I think it's, in a way, Adam, it's not, my answer might sound a bit twee, but I genuinely mean it. It really is about the experience that we give to people. So I firmly believe that you can reject, in inverted commas, somebody well and provide opportunities, insight and information for them in terms of how they might want to think about developing their career. But it's not an easy journey. I hope that in doing that, we don't switch people off what is a really attractive industry. And taking Gemma's point, we don't just offer, do we, claims underwriting, risk management opportunities. You can, broadly speaking, be anything you want in many of our firms. So I think it's about we take our responsibility to give people a really good experience, whether we hire them or not, very seriously.
Definitely. Gemma, what do you guys do around sort of apprentice graduate scheme opportunities?
Sure. So at HDI, our focus at the moment is more around apprenticeships. We're obviously a much smaller organisation than Steve's, and we still have a graduate intake in areas like actuarial. But we made a very deliberate decision a couple of years ago when our DE&I committee asked us to focus on social mobility, that apprenticeships and social mobility, sort of to push that agenda, could really go very much hand in hand. So we have a smaller cohort, but we currently have 12 live apprentices in our business, and are really proud of that group of early careers individuals. What's been really interesting for us is we've tried to make sure that we maintain that balance of, we want to promote advocacy within our business. So we have traditionally seen lots of people entering the sector because they've got family or friends or personal recommendations. And we wanted to get a balance between not losing that, because that is a lovely way for people to enter the industry, but also to broaden our workforce and our opportunity for entry-level roles. So we continue to run a program whereby we open that up for recommendations through our existing employee base, and then we partner with a third party as well to outreach into schools, into some I guess of the areas where individuals wouldn't necessarily have insurance as a first career choice. And we bring all of those individuals together as part of an assessment day. They go through a lot of, I guess, less traditional forms of assessment. So we do a lot of speed dating style interviews, a lot of different activities, so that we really give individuals their best chance to shine in a number of different situations. But we certainly push the apprenticeship piece as a business at the moment. And we've been playing with, does an internship just before your apprenticeship work well? Because that is a chance for both employee and the individual to assess whether or not this is the right career choice for them. Or actually, does it make sense to have that internship a year before? And that seems to be working better for us now, that we help people understand a little bit more about the industry a good year ahead of actually wanting to enter the workforce. We get to know them, they get to know us, and then we advertise those opportunities to them very early. So for us at the moment, early careers is very much focused on apprenticeships, but I've equally seen both entry points work very well.
It's so fascinating seeing how different firms approach the challenge, and that's definitely a part of what Destination Insurance is about, is this sharing of best practice of what different firms do and facilitating that sharing of ideas, definitely. And Adam, I just wanted to come back to something you were saying about the skills debate, or I guess we could say upskilling or reskilling perhaps of the insurance workforce, especially around that technology data side, as data science and data analytics perhaps become more prevalent in insurance job roles maybe. But what specific skills really do you think that UKGI needs to develop in order to future-proof itself and its workforce? And how is this different from perhaps the skills that are commonplace today across the market?
Well, as you've touched on there, Katie, I mean, clearly the changing landscape from a technological advancement perspective is going to require the skill set to adapt and develop in order to meet the changing requirements on individuals within the profession. But in response to the question about what types of skills might be needed, I was reflecting earlier in the year on the FSSC's Future Skills Report, which obviously for a broader sector, but it identified within that there's been a fairly consistent level of demand around those technical skills. So obviously it's still there, it's still something that needs to be retained, but there's been a real growth in demand around things like the behavioral skills, so encompassing creative thinking, relationship management, which again, as part and parcel of any sort of commitment around training and development, I think is really important. That's part of developing those sort of well-rounded professionals. And I think aligned to that, there are those enabling skills as well. So recognizing that as well as the behavioral skills, learning things about presentation skills and so on that will become an integral part of a modern professional's role. So I think it's there that there's a real opportunity to develop and address those demands. And I think what that also presents as an opportunity around the sort of upskilling and reskilling is recognizing the transferability of an awful lot of those types of skills that can then be brought into the sector, and then focus on the technical skills training to develop that as a potential gap. I'd be interested in what the other panelists think about that.
Yeah, I totally agree, Adam. And I think for me, this sort of focus on skills, if we think back, just connect your question around skills, Katie, with the conversation we were just having around early in careers. Look, if organizations can't build, for example, a diverse incoming cohort when you're thinking about apprenticeships, interns, or graduates, when broadly speaking people have the same levels of competence, where can you do it? So for me, the skills piece, I think it's really important to recognize both customer expectations and technology are moving really, really fast. From a customer perspective, customers rightly compare their insurers or their brokers or their distributors to the very best service they receive anywhere for anything in their life. So, and I think that's a really sobering message. We might think of ourselves as traditional organizations, and customers are thinking, but I just want an experience that looks at what I had from here or here. So customer expectations are changing. And then, of course, we all know about the race of tech and digital, and whether we're training people or not, elements of our workforce are seeing, learning, and deploying AI, for example, in their life outside of work in ways they wouldn't have done a few years ago. So I think having an organizational view of core skills and keeping it up to date is really important. And for me, those core skills go way beyond what they did 5 years ago. And I'll sort of give a few ideas in a second. And when I'm talking about core skills, I'm taking the essential technical skills for a role as a complete given. So beyond those core skills, I think our agenda needs to include, or some of the things that we are focusing on are things like digital literacy at the right level for everyone across the organization, not just your frontline underwriters, but your exec team as well, whether they want it or not. We have to drag people kicking and screaming to digital literacy. Customer centricity and empathy, I think, is really important. And then we focus on sort of 4 other core areas: agility and adaptability, sustainability and ESG awareness that's relevant for the role. Complex problem solving is a really interesting skill that I think people will need more and more in the future. Creativity and innovation. And then our final kind of grouping is communication and collaboration. And Adam, taking your point, a number of those would fit into what we have always historically termed softer skills. And maybe as an industry, we might have put less emphasis on in the past. But back to the start, customers expect different. So they expect really outstanding customer empathy skills. So we have to build people's skill in those.
Yeah, no, it's really fascinating. And I guess in terms of the new skills hitting the market as well, what are you guys seeing in terms of perhaps new job roles? What is the impact of these skills that we need now in the market? Is there a lot of new job roles being created, or are the skills being folded into existing or current roles? Just sort of keen to get a better understanding of, I guess, how the workforce is perhaps changing in that way.
So it's a balance of both, really, I would say, in terms of augmenting existing roles and then creating new roles. And I probably sort of think of maybe 2 examples around specific skills, continuing that theme around digital literacy and AI. Insurance remains fundamentally a people business, and whilst some roles will definitely be automated and demand for them may shrink, I think the more likely scenario in the short term, for example, is that AI will augment into all roles and hopefully build better outcomes for customers. And I think what that means for people is that anyone who's able to work with, understand, deploy, and exploit AI will be more likely to be successful in the future than people can't or won't, people who can't or won't use the technology. And then there are definitely examples of new roles across many of our organizations. We're all battling with things like legacy technology that underpins some of our most important undertakings. So robotic process automation engineers are really vital at Zurich, for example, to helping us improve the customer and the employee user experience when we don't have the means to take out and replace the legacy tech. I think it's really exciting that an RPA engineer can have as fulfilling a career in some of our firms than as a specialty underwriter can, for example.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And Adam, do you have anything to add on that?
Well, I guess we fully recognise the emerging trends that Steve has talked to there, and have developed what we refer to as our professional map, which is a mechanism that captures across a variety of different bands within an individual's career, within the profession, an opportunity to identify what skills and learning development they might well need, and we underpin that with access to suitable resources, and that is split across the combination of technical, enabling, and behavioural skills. But I think that the more you then start to see some of those more technical skills, so those that relate to harnessing AI, harnessing technology, software development, and to some extent you would argue that the kind of the empathy skills around customer service that Steve mentioned, by virtue of the transferability of those skills, it brings a different challenge to our table, which is how do we hold on to that talent? Because they can just as well take that and grow within the profession as they can then take those skills into other sectors. And so I think that's an important dimension that we mustn't lose sight of, as well as recognizing those emerging roles and providing the scope and frameworks for individuals to develop their skills accordingly. It's recognizing that there are then challenges that can potentially bring for the profession as well.
No, it's fascinating. You've actually touched on something I was going to sort of ask you guys as well around retention. I talk to a lot of people in the market, and I've done 6 years at Insurance Times now, but that seems like peanuts compared to sort of most people in the industry when you're hearing sort of 20, 30, 40 years plus in the sector. So there's a lot of people with very lengthy tenures. But then what are the opportunities then to excite employees who perhaps have a few years experience under their belts? We don't want them thinking the grass is greener in the tech sector to go and work for an up and coming startup in the tech space, for example. How do we really get employees excited to stay in insurance?
So
Who wants to dive on?
Yeah, perhaps.
Sorry, you go, Gemma.
I could offer a few thoughts here. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily come at it from an angle, Katie, of just, those individuals that are, I guess, more akin to roles that are in the digital space. But as you say, more generally, we do have a retention challenge, and I think some of that comes from, particularly at our place, a younger workforce demographic and people's expectations changing over how you progress your career and the pace at which you progress your career. But there are, of course, things that we can do. I think it's around individuals understanding the different ways that your career can develop in a particular business, so that it isn't always that lateral promotion, but it's the breadth of different experience that you can have to sort of build your own sort of personal career toolkit. So small things around, how much more can we offer development programs where we give individuals exposure to exec, working on quite exciting sort of business challenge projects. So certainly that's something that we've done, where we've brought together individuals from across a number of different functions as part of an accelerated development program, but we've given them the opportunity to work on business challenges that they wouldn't necessarily see day to day in their job, but where they can utilize those skills and experiences that they're building. I think the other thing for us to consider more and more is, can we utilize those skills with secondments, either within our business or within, the broader industry? Can we utilize the relationships we have with brokers, with law firms, to enable people to continue to utilize those skills that they have, but to see that they're able to move on and do different things? But I guess maybe a bit controversially, Katie, I think the other thing we need to recognise is we won't retain everyone, and it's actually okay for individuals that have developed a particular skill set at pace, and where, because we may have a flatter structure, the next opportunity for them may not be within our business. But if they remain in the industry and they're able to go and develop those skills elsewhere, the industry is still small, and we potentially see those individuals coming back. Not quite an answer around how do we keep them in the industry versus going to tech, but I do think there are different things that we can do to give people those different career experiences that they're looking for. And as long as we can articulate those things to individuals and help them understand that it isn't always just that very linear career progression, I do think we're able to retain a good population.
Yeah, Gemma, I couldn't agree more. And I love your point around, can we think about sort of the widest chain that we have across the industry and be taking advantage? Somebody told me a term a few months ago, and I really love it: outurnships, where people go to a law firm or a broker, or if you're in a brokerage, you come to an insurer and gain kind of different perspectives, experience and skills. And I don't think we've done that enough. And Katie, for me, the retention challenge can be really helped along by kind of proper good quality evaluation of your overall employee proposition, all the things that Gemma's just talked about. From a customer perspective, we probably think really deeply about our offering, the products and services that we build and sell, how we take them to market, what customers and distributors say about our products, how we use that to improve them for the future, and how we retain customers. Many of my business colleagues spend, quite rightly, huge amounts of their time thinking about that retention challenge. But do we do the same for our employee offering? So for me, I think it's just really important to think about the end-to-end offering. We've talked a bit about how we attract people, But I think we should also make sure that we spend time thinking about, and again, when I say when we spend time, it just so happens, Gemma and I are in the HR profession. When I say we, I mean the whole business, but that we spend time thinking about how you keep people meaningfully engaged, how you give them really interesting opportunities, Gemma, the stuff that you've just been talked about. And then I do think there is something around sort of an icing on the cake. We did some research a few years ago that helped us to understand that huge proportions of people who are retiring from the industry would stay in work if they had access to suitable flexibility. And I think that is an absolute nugget of information for us, and are we helping people to think about how they retire? So we work really hard to offer flexible retirement options so that people come in towards the end of their career, in their view, not in my view, have different options about what will be increasingly important in the future. People talk to me all the time about the fact that, I retired and I just stopped, and this thing that had been defining for me for 20 or 30 or 40 years wasn't there anymore. So thinking about how you give people different routes into retirement, I think is really cool.
I think that's a brilliant idea, actually. I love that. I also wanted to get your take on M&A in terms of how that then relates to talent. I think we've all probably been party to conversations where there's been huge consolidation within perhaps the broker or insurer market, for example, and the employees within that business might have been a bit disillusioned by the move, maybe, and Aviva wanted to set up separately or perhaps gone to a different market. I mean, do you think that M&A and consolidation is having an impact on employee retention and development? Is it a positive or negative there? Do you think it offers perhaps greater opportunities for talent within our marketplace, or is it a bit of a challenge to be overcome?
But I will offer a view on that, but it's not something which I can then back up with any huge amount of evidence. It's not something that we have engaged in research around. But I guess the principles that both Steve and Gemma were talking about ought to be consistent, irrespective as to whether or not you're dealing with kind of firms going through M&A activity, because ultimately the broader challenge for the profession is about retaining that talent, or indeed proving an attractive proposition for new talent coming through. And so I think it's just an opportunity to look at that as a way in which you can then whether it's about that sort of outernship as opposed to internship, and reflecting on how then you are looking to kind of create opportunities to retain the talent within the broader profession, even if it isn't necessary to be retained within particular firms. So I think there is definite applicability of those principles, irrespective as to whether or not you're dealing with specific challenges such as that, would be my take on it.
Really interesting.
Katie, it's not a sort of transition that has been particularly relevant to Zurich over the last few years, but actually I would sort of extend Adam's thinking. I think this is about change more generally. M&A is a piece of change in an organisation, and I suppose there are a few things that we know about change, aren't we? We know that, taking your last point, Adam, I was amalgamating Adam and talent, bringing together at times of change, people tend, your highest talent individuals can tend to be more unsettled than some of the rest of the population, and it can drive people to look outside the organisation, and you might not be thinking about it, but the door becomes open. So I think that's really important to remember. We also know that change, and this is a sort of a sector piece of insight, not a Zurich specific, but a sector piece of insight. We also know that some of the groups that we are trying to drive up representation in our organisations are disproportionately impacted. So historically, change has disproportionately impacted senior women compared to senior men, and I think we need to, we just need to have all of this change activity and the impact of it on our minds.
That's great that you touched there on the diversity element, because that's sort of something I wanted to ask you guys about next. Just before I dive into my next question, just a reminder to the audience that if you guys have any questions for our panelists, do feel free to use the Q&A function, and we'll make sure to get to those in a little bit. But touching on what you were saying, Steve, there about diversity, that's obviously something that here at Insurance Times we've included in the Destination Insurance Charter around sort of recruitment practices and things, for example. Obviously, UKGI has moved the dial quite a lot from that very traditional pale, male and stale catchphrase that I think we've probably all heard and said at some point or other. But what is the current lay of the land when it comes to diversity in UK GI? You know, are there certain demographics, like you were saying, about sort of senior female leaders, for example, that are perhaps struggling to join in or participate in certain areas of our industry? And what do you think can drive change here?
So I'm happy to start, and then for my colleagues to dive in. So specifically from the Zurich perspective, when I was thinking about, you know, we will talk about diversity, I sort of wanted to kind of give something concrete as opposed to talking in really generalized terms about diversity. So I thought I would have a go at answering the question, Katie, with one area where I think we've made really great progress and one area that's harder to change and include some specifics. So if I think about the positive, I'm an eternal optimist, so let's start with the positive. When I started in my current role in 2017-18, we were publishing our first gender pay gap and analysing representation of women in senior positions. So my positive is going to focus on gender. Let me give you the data. Our gender pay gaps then were just above our gender pay gap then was just above 27%, and women occupied around 30% of senior positions. So just hold on to those statistics for a second. We were really clear, based on research, both research and intuition, that lack of access to flexible working was actually holding women back in their careers. And we went full force behind a drive to show and genuinely give flexibility to everyone in the firm. The opportunity isn't gender specific. And really, alongside a huge number of other interventions and development, we've made really great progress. And I think it's really important to remember that what you actually have to do when it comes to anything like diversity is take it off PowerPoint slides and actually start doing something. So driving for flexibility was ours. The gender pay gap at the firm is now 12.9%, so that's a big kind of decrease. And I'm really proud that at Zurich in the UK, women occupy 50.4% of senior positions at the firm. I'm really proud to say there are more female senior leaders at Zurich than there are male leaders. And I know it generates challenging contention, and I will take the challenging contention head on because it shows demonstrable progress. If I then think about areas where it's been harder to move the needle, increasing representation of colleagues from ethnic minority backgrounds has been challenging. And more specifically, let me get really specific, increasing representation from the Black community has been particularly challenging. Overall, our organisation now pretty much reflects what you would see in UK census data. So broadly speaking, the profile of people at Zurich from an ethnic minority background broadly represents what you would see in the census. But it's still very difficult for us to attract and retain people from the Black community because there are so many different challenges. And Gemma, taking your point earlier, you talked about kind of routes into insurance. And, you know, for many people in the populations we're trying to attract, they might be the first person to have ever worked in this sector. And you know, they have a very different level of understanding of of how you're successful in organizations like this. So huge positive progress when it comes to things like gender, much more challenging when it comes to things like ethnicity.
It's great to hear the actual stats on that, Steve. Thank you for digging those out for us. Gemma, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I would certainly echo what Steve says from a gender diversity perspective. When we look at the gender diversity we have at HDI, it's something we're also very proud of. Led by a female CEO, very good representation on our exec team. It drives a dialogue within our business that is a really positive one. So that is something that we have worked. I say worked hard at, that we have worked at over time, and we are now reaping the rewards. I think for us, and I picked up on it earlier from an apprenticeship perspective, there are a couple of areas for us that we do need to do more work in, and one of them is around social mobility, not just when we consider entry-level roles and entry into the profession, but social mobility more broadly, and certainly challenging ourselves and some of our recruiting managers around the requirements for roles. And it really picks up on a lot of what Adam and Steve were talking about earlier around that skills-based sort of recruitment, rather than that very traditional, what do we require in a role, around the professional qualifications. So we're challenging ourselves a lot as a business around what do we really require to really open up much more opportunity for individuals to join the business. But it is definitely a challenge for us. The other area for us that we're really just scratching the surface on at the moment, but it is a big discussion topic, particularly amongst our DE&I the individuals that are championing DE&I for us at HDI, is around neurodiversity as well. So we don't collect the data today around neurodiversity as a business. I think we're still on a journey around people feeling comfortable with sharing, but we know that we're having much more of a conversation around neurodiversity. And again, thinking about how can we make our recruitment practices a lot more inclusive. Simple things, Katie, just around asking people if they want any adjustments, or not even asking, giving people permission to ask. So we do very simple things now. We share details of what our recruitment process will involve with an individual before they come into the building, so that they can familiarize themselves with what that's going to look like. They can prepare themselves. It also invites an opportunity for people to ask for adjustments if they want to. It feels very simple, but they're small steps towards us, making improvements in those areas.
If I can just build out the point that Gemma's just made, and both Gemma and Steve have given very comprehensive answers to your question, which leaves me a little wriggle room to play with. But that point around neurodiversity, I think, is a really important one. Within CII, we run an annual program, our New Generation program, where we have cohorts of younger individuals within the profession that run a kind of a particular project for the course of a 12-month period, and then they would then deliver reports or guidance documents and what have you at the end of that year. And this year, one of the groups in particular were focused very much on neurodiversity, and they have developed a kind of guidance tool which would be an online tool for employers to be able to better understand what they need to consider in employing, and not just employing, but also then supporting individuals that might identify as neurodiverse and within their workforce, so that it both provides a level of visibility and awareness around the sorts of considerations that need to be put in place, but also then presents a real opportunity to harness what realistically should be a very inclusive profession. And if you take it back to the question that you asked right at the outset, and sharing that statistic around that such small percentage of young people that are considering insurance as a career option, if we are to make the profession that much more appealing, then I think the level of inclusion that we're able to then demonstrate is represented across the profession is a fundamental lever that we need to be pulling. And so I think that the more that the sector is doing to demonstrate how it is providing opportunities that are genuinely inclusive, then I think the better it will be for the future of the profession moving forward.
No, definitely. That's great to hear. And I guess you guys have given such a comprehensive answer there. But if you had to put a pin in terms of a top tip of how UKGI can be a safe and inclusive industry for everybody to work in, where people can bring their whole selves to work comfortably, what would you shout out as perhaps the one thing that you think can make quite an impactful difference? Steve, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll dive in, and I'm going to steal two if that's okay. I'm so sorry, Katie. I can't.
That's all right. You go for it.
Have one.
Anything for you, Steve.
I think it's about living up to your values and not tolerating behaviours that we know are unacceptable. I think it's really, really important to do what you say you're going to do. There is no point in having inclusivity carved in stone in your reception area if you don't demonstrate that when there are non-inclusive behaviours in the workplace. So listening to your organisation, having a finger on the pulse of what's truly happening. Your culture, I think, is likely to be viewed as the worst behaviours you're allowed to go unchecked. I think that's really sobering. And then from the perspective of things like building diversity and safe places in organisations, accepting that there is no silver bullet is really important, but not having an action plan that has hundreds of things on it is equally important, trying to pick off the things that you think will make the biggest difference.
Great, thank you. Gemma, do you want to add anything there?
Probably pick up on something that Steve said, and it's something I talk to our DE&I committee about on occasions around, focusing on something rather than trying to be everything to everyone. So sort of just the spin off what Steve had said around no silver bullet, but I think there is always a tendency to say, we need to look at this and we need to make sure that we're responding to this, but actually what we need to do is agree where we're going to put all our effort behind this year and double down on that. And once we get sort of policies updated and practices in place and we're living and breathing this, then we can start looking at the next thing. And then the other piece for me is just being authentic as a business. So being true to ourselves as well. I think that plays a huge part in terms of people recognizing the way that you operate as a business, and from a diversity and inclusion perspective, for me, it is just around that authenticity. It's a bit of an extension around sort of bringing your whole self to work.
That's really interesting. Adam, is there anything you wanted to add on that?
I think it's interesting too when you reflect on the fact that standing firm to that commitment around culture and values, which is really important at a time where there is some further challenges to the ability to be able to kind of like stay true to that. But I think it's all that's been said absolutely right. I would suggest that then one of the critical ingredients of that is around communication. So making sure that you're communicating what it is that you're committing to, and looking to share examples of how you are addressing and responding to challenges that emerge, so that there is that level of visibility and transparency about what's going on within firms.
Thank you, guys. Those insights are really interesting. Thank you. I guess the other key topic I kind of wanted to pick your brains on is around that multi-generational workforce. Obviously, I think we can all put it into buckets in terms of pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, in terms of working expectations, and that change in hybrid working wasn't really the normal practice or commonplace at all. We've actually had a question from the audience come in on this from George Matthews, so I'm just going to put his thoughts to you before diving into my questions. But he said there's a real shortage of people with 4 to 6 years experience because graduate and apprenticeship programs reduced during the COVID pandemic. That's pushed salaries up for 4 to 6 year experience roles and made hiring really competitive. Now that we know how to work flexibly and virtually, what could the market do differently if something like that happened again to avoid the same issue? Who wants to get stuck into this one? Go on, Adam.
That's a great question. I was actually in a meeting earlier, and we were talking about the skills and talent landscape, and a colleague at the meeting was talking about that very point, that during the period of COVID, by virtue of the fact that you had apprenticeships that were not able to obviously benefit from what they would ordinarily have benefited from in terms of engaging within the workplace, everything was being delivered remotely, that I understand that the dropout rate during that period was quite significant, and that kind of has left a gap. And so I asked as to whether or not what's happened subsequently has seen a re-emergence of numbers that were aligned to what we were seeing pre-COVID, and it's not yet recovered to that place. So I think that George is right in articulating the potentially seismic challenge that could represent. So whilst not necessarily as yet being clear on what answers I would give to the question, I think that what's clear is that there is a need for us to ensure that should we find ourselves in a similar challenging environment, that we do learn from what's happened before and think about potentially ways in which we can harness technology that would enable us to ensure that those dropout rates didn't align with what we've seen previously. I know that there's a lot of models around virtual work experience dynamics, and maybe utilizing those in a more effective way might be a way to kind of keep people engaged, because I suspect that was the challenge, is that being able to maintain that level of engagement when you weren't able to deliver the same program that they'd necessarily signed up for, it would have been a key factor in why people were stepping away.
It's really interesting. Steve, was there anything you wanted to add on that one?
It would be one of those ones, isn't it, where I hope we would look back and learn from our experience. I tend to suspect, actually, we would probably approach a number of things kind of quite differently in the future. we did continue with our grad hiring through that period, but I know for many reasons, many people didn't, for many understandable reasons. I suspect as an industry, we would probably approach it somewhat differently, because I think we're all feeling the pressure of the sort of the shrinkage of graduates in that time period, and then 4 years down the line, we're all reaping the negative benefit impact.
No, definitely.
Perhaps that one of the things which, as a broader consideration, but that might well address that, is about driving up the percentage of employees within firms that are actively learning within their roles. I mean, it comes back to this point about wanting to ensure that you don't focus too much on the new and emerging talent, but at the expense of those that are perhaps more established within the roles. And I think, if you are able to properly engage individuals as active learners, and they are recognizing the value that they're getting through their engagement with their learning within their working environment, then hopefully that would be a major contributory factor to wanting to then retain and kind of commit longer term to the profession.
That's really interesting. Thank you, guys. I'm just going to have a look at some of the other questions that we've had come through, just to make sure we answer them, because I'm aware we're at the 5 minutes to go point. We have had one question come through, sort of questioning why potential employees will be attracted to insurance when there's been a lot of news around redundancies, for example. I guess that's perhaps one of the fallout challenges that arises from M&A and consolidation, and equally perhaps with the AI debate as well. So I don't know if you guys have got a view on how to perhaps mitigate that challenge, or a way that we can communicate better to prospective people who want to join the sector on that.
Goes back to, excuse me, what in reality sort of the first answer that Gemma was giving about how we make sure that our industry is attractive to the widest range of people. It's really easy to focus on change, and change is an inevitability, isn't it? There will always be levels of change, but I do think it's important to remember that the insurance industry employs over 300,000 people in the UK. It's an enormous contributor to sort of UK PLC. So it's important that we get this stuff right. I think we need to treat people really well when change is occurring in organisations, but I just think making sure that people understand what our organisational purpose is, the kind of roles that are available, and also the rewards that come with it.
Definitely. Adam, Gemma, anything else to add on that question?
It's not specific to the question, Katie, but I increasingly get individuals that are very curious, right? Whenever a role is open, they will ask, what is the reason for this role being open? Why has the prior incumbent left the business, or are you expanding? So I think it's also just around having those transparent and honest conversations with them, slightly differently to a broader announcement on a wider scale redundancy program. But I do think it's about recognizing that businesses will be growing in certain areas and there will be change in others, as Steve says, and that will be inevitable, and that is important for us to be able to continue to prosper. But we certainly get individuals asking us the question around why has this vacancy come about, and we share very transparently with them, so that they can make an informed choice about joining us in the same way that we can make an informed choice about them.
Yeah, that's a really valid point. We've had another question come through about the proposed UK captive regime and what considerations there might be around the talent required to, I guess, fulfill this. I don't know if anyone's got a view on this in terms of the talent required to back the proposed UK captive regime or not, or whether that's a bit niche for you.
Yeah, I definitely don't have a really specific. I would roll out all of our standard talent management principles, but note that a really important part of talent management is working out what's unique about either niche parts of the organisation or roles. So yes, I don't have a specific answer, but needless to say, we will be taking account of the niche elements of a role to make sure that we've got a really great talent plan in place.
Great. I'm just going to throw one more question at you. I wanted to go back a bit to the multi-generational workforce element, because there's been a lot of conversation, I think, about flexible working, and in particular sort of being in the office versus sort of younger employees who perhaps have never worked 5 days in an office, and they've sort of embraced home working, and for them hybrid is normal. They haven't got that comparator there in terms of working practices. I just wondered how challenging this is to manage from an employer's perspective when you're looking to perhaps, you know, be inclusive and embrace diversity, as we were saying.
Hey, look, Katie, I'm happy to start. I'm sure Steve and Adam will have comments on this one. It's probably the most talked about topic whenever you go to an HR forum, and has been since post-COVID. It's a really fine balance, because it incorporates so much of what we've talked about this afternoon, from trying to broaden your talent pool as much as possible. So you want to be as flexible as possible, whilst trying to retain as many people as you can. Therefore, you want them to understand the organisation that they're part of. And sometimes that does require that physical interaction, that sitting and shadowing in different meetings. There is a lot of competition out there. So as a single employer, you want to provide people with the best opportunities, and individuals, particularly those entering the workforce now, are more demanding in terms of flexibility. Certainly, all of the conversations that we have with prospective employees, they don't focus around those core elements of compensation. They focus around what else does the organisation have to offer, and a lot of that stems around flexibility. So it is a real fine balance for us. Certainly, it's a challenge that we face every day. And then, of course, you are asking managers to manage in a very different environment to the one that they managed in 5 years ago. The practical things where you're hosting a hybrid meeting, how you are understanding how somebody's thinking and feeling when you're not necessarily having that face-to-face interaction, recognizing that people have a whole breadth of caring responsibilities. So coming into the office every day doesn't make you an attractive employer. So there is so much to juggle. And I know that all of us are facing the challenges to sort of what is the sweet spot of homework and office work to really get that right.
No, thank you. That's a really thoughtful answer, and a really nice place to end as well, because I can't believe it. It's 3 o'clock already. That hour has absolutely flown by. So we've now reached the end of our time together this afternoon. So just to sort of recap, really, destination insurance has been a real labour of love for us over at Insurance Times, and I'm really, really excited to be sharing it with you all today. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Adam, Steve and Gemma here for taking the time to join us for this panel discussion, as well as our campaign sponsors, the CAI, Zurich and HDI, for the support you've provided so far. Huge thank you for helping us launch Destination Insurance today. I hope to see lots of you at our Destination Insurance conference in January. Do feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any further questions or thoughts about the campaign. Also, just to flag, we're actually doing a research report on talent development across UKGI as well. So that survey is now open if you want to participate in that and share your views ahead of us publishing our exclusive report. My head of research, Savan Shah, is leading on that if you have any questions there. But other than that, hopefully we'll all catch up with you soon. Thank you so much, everyone.